Hey guys, so here is the follow-up video for my sweet potato adventure. On AdventuristaAZ.com, which is my blog, I have a gardening adventure series, and one of the things I was trying to do were sweet potatoes. But man, oh man, they have been exploding. We've had some fun, we've learned some lessons, and here is kind of the final summary of how the whole experiment went. So as you can see, the sweet potatoes absolutely grew. I probably should have cut some of these down a little bit sooner, but you know, life happens and other adventures were going on. For instructions on what to do to get them to this point, visit the blog. I've got a couple posts that detail not only the setup, but also walk through a couple of the things I was learning along the way. So the whole reason why I decided I wanted to root the sweet potatoes and go through this whole experiment is that I have a whole bunch of fruit trees in my backyard. I've got the apples, oranges, peaches, apricots, lemon, grapefruit. I'll have a lime and a clementine soon. I've got a plum up front. What the sweet potatoes do is they provide extra ground cover on top of the mulch to cool down the area. In the heat of the summer, the temperature on top of the mulch is still really warm, and that heat radiates up to the trees. When you put the living mulch, which is the greenery provided by the cowpeas and sweet potatoes, that actually is going to allow that area to cool down about 20 degrees. But just to review quickly about the sweet potato process. So sweet potatoes grow differently than potatoes. It's a vine. And when you're growing it, you could just chop it up, throw it in the ground, hope that it grows. Or you can root it in a jar, and then it grows slips, which are these vines out of the top. And then what you do with the vines is you take those off, put them in water, and let them grow its own roots. Now, once we have their own roots, they're ready to plant either in the ground sorry, excuse me, winter cold. They're ready to plant in the ground, or in this case, it is still getting down to the 30s at night. The sweet potatoes aren't going to like the cold. It's going to make them die back. So now is not the time to put them in the ground, even here in Arizona in January. So instead, I'm going to put them in some of the pots to give them some soil. Right now they're doing well with the water, but I think they need a little bit of nutrients. And I need room in these jars for all of this. Some of the things that I learned. There's actually different leaf shapes. So this is my white potato. You can see the leaf has a teardrop shape. It's a much fatter shape than what you see on my purple sweet potato. This one has a much longer, skinny shape to its leaves. And then my garnet potato has the three-pronged leaf. So they are different from each other, which was an interesting surprise. Sweet potatoes don't like the cold. So you want to plant these outside when the ground is at least 65 degrees or warmer. And if the air is too cold, they're going to start to yellow and die off. That was one of my learnings with my poor little purple potato. It was in an area where it was a little too chilly. And, you know, just like it would in nature, it started to yellow. When I moved it to a warmer area that got a little bit more sun and was under one of the heat vents, it has started to regrow its green and not be so spindly. But you want to make sure that your place in your house gives it good light, something that isn't completely direct light that's going to bake it, but also that is going to give it the warmth and the sunlight it needs. So this is an orange potato. And you can see how it was growing roots underneath, but it was also growing slips underneath too. And for this one, nothing was happening up top. So instead of cutting these off, I'm going to try a little bit different thing with it. I'm actually going to remove the roots that were growing so that it depends on the potato itself for its nutrients. And then I'm going to see if these can turn themselves around and start growing upward, and if it will root out of the other side. I've got quite a few little nodes that have started to bud out, so I'm hopeful for it, but we'll see what happens for this one. Sometimes your potatoes don't always grow on the top like they're supposed to. For the most part, these all followed where the smaller end is what rooted and the top end is where you got the slips from. This little guy is my backroot sweet potato, and he did the very opposite. His first couple slips were grown in the water and completely submerged underwater, and nothing was happening up top. Even the one that I've got coming out of him right now, which is really happy and healthy, has its own roots and pretty much started in the water. This guy is also starting to, you can see he's starting to soften up top. So I think his time is done. What I'm gonna do for him, because he already has the roots on here, I'm actually just gonna cut that off and put this straight in the planting mix, as opposed to putting it in the water to root. Some of the others, let's use my happy little purple potato. In this example, there's no roots already growing. So I will cut this off just flush with the sweet potato and then put it in the water for a couple weeks. And once it sprouts roots, then it's gonna go either in the planting mix or the ground, depending on what the temperature is outside. Here's some of my purple sweet potato slips, which I think will do much better once they get in the soil. And the long one on my plant. So I am just going to cut it right against the body of it. So you can see where that came from. Cut clear off. And then this is going to go into my water so that it can grow roots just like all of its friends have. On here you can kind of see the areas where the roots will grow. So right there, there's some little white nubs in a row. And these two areas are where you're going to start to see those roots shooting out from. So see how those have the roots usually in a row and in groups? So that's where your roots are going to come from. So that guy's going to go in my water so that he can grow the roots necessary to survive in his pot. And then all of these are going to go in their planting pot, and we'll see what happens with them. Hopefully they grow back a little bit. I see some budding out where I think it will regenerate. This one just got a little bit too cold, and I also experimented on him by adding a foliar fertilizer to the water, and I think it was a little bit too much. When I put it in with these guys, when I put it in with the potatoes themselves, the potatoes that are supplying the nutrients to the slips, those love the foliar fertilizer. This is what happened afterwards. But beforehand, I had put it in the water of the slips as well as the potato. If you're gonna do that, I would put it just in the potatoes water, not in with the slip, because I think that it also gave them a little bit of a burn on their leaves. So there we go. We'll be, I'll be busy potting. We'll get this up on the blog for you guys. If you have any questions about the sweet potatoes, please let me know. And I will keep you updated on this little guy's progress and what I learn about if they can turn themselves around and grow upward. I'm going to use my Farmer Greg's planting mix from the Urban Farm. That is formulated for outside planting, and the reason I'm not using a potting mix is because these are going to be going in the ground once it's warm enough to do so. So let's just take and I found these awesome little 6-packs of temporary pots at the dollar store. One 6-pack was $1. Doesn't get much better than that. And then I also found little plant labels that I can use with it as well. Although I know the leaf shapes for all of these, I do still have a jewel sweet potato and this little orange guy that I'm not sure if the leaves will wind up similar to one of my other existing ones. So I still want to keep them labeled for the future. So let's find one of my jewel sprouts. These guys have some healthy roots going on. Okay. Clear away some of those leaves that had fallen. Any of the leaves that were underwater will die off when you put your slip in the water, but that's not a problem. This one is still done beautifully, and check out that root growth. So we've got a little bit of soil in here. Just gonna put that in there and then fill around it. If you have any questions about the sweet potatoes and their growth, definitely check out my earlier posts on AdventuristaAZ. And if you have any questions, just shoot me a question in the comments. I'm happy to answer anything. And I'm really excited for the benefit that these have to the plants that they're planted near. Plus, how cool is it to serve Thanksgiving and serve sweet potatoes that you grew in your backyard? Like, that feels like woman goals to me. Okay. So I have the roots in the soil. I don't have it too far down though, because I do want this to grow downwards, and I don't want to plant it higher up and have it suffocate the top of the plant. So here's one of my sweet potatoes. This one was one of my garnets, so I'm just going to give it a little label and then set it off to the side, and then we will give it a little water before we continue on with everything else. This one, let's tease those roots out a little bit. Whoa, it's got a great root system going. Okay, so these are all the roots attached to the plant. And I have decided that this potato has done its duty and is done for the season. So I'm just going to take my knife and cut right against it. And then here is my new slip that I'll be rooting out. Well, not rooting out, I'll be planting it because it's already rooted out. So if you come across any that already have a healthy enough root system that you could just put them straight in the ground, go for it. If they don't have roots though, and if it's just the part on top, then you're going to want to give it some time in the water so that it can get those roots established. Okay. Push this up to the side. Some great roots in there, and I don't want it to get bound up. Normally I would say do this outside, obviously, because it's, you know, a little bit messy, but it's a 50-degree day and it's super windy out today. So instead, I figure it's worth the mess. And y'all wouldn't be able to hear me on a video if it was too windy. white potatoes in the soil. All right, so that took a second. I now have 14 of the slips potted. My potatoes have their hair cut. The new slips have been put in here to root. And then once they root out, hopefully they'll be going in the ground outside. If it's still a little too cold out, they'll be going in pots like their brothers and sisters here. If you guys have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments, as well as check out the progression from start to finish on our blog at AdventuristaAZ and click on the Gardening Adventure series.